Hello, I'm Pete Martin. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in other videos of mandolin, fiddle, improvisation, and many other musical subjects, click the subscribe banner below. And if you want to be notified when I post new videos, click the bell icon right next to it. This video series looks at improvising on the mandolin for people who have never improvised before. It also is very useful for people who already improvise but are looking for some things to add to their improvisations. For both sets of people, I would definitely recommend going back to video 1 and progressing through, as the videos do tend to build on each other. In this video, we're going to use the major scale, the G major scale, and think of improv against the G major chord. There is not a PDF file that goes along with this one, unlike the previous videos, because we're just going to be looking at improvising and how to practice improvising. So what I want you to do for this video is to just follow the ideas that I present here and then practice them. The first thing that you will need to review is the G major chord tone scale. So that's the notes G, A, B, C, D, F sharp, and G. Remember, we take out the E, or the sixth note of the scale, ascending. Now the descending is G, E, we take out the seventh note of the scale, the F sharp, descending, D, C, B, A, and G. So you'll need to be able to play the G chord tone scale from as low as you can go in first position, the G note, the open G string, to as high as you can go in first position, which is the 7th fret on the E string, or the note B. So it would be this. Remember, once again, the major chord tone scale, you remove the 6th note ascending and the 7th note descending. So review this now. Now what happens in the chord tone scale, remember, is the note of the chord is played whenever the beat is played. And what that means is whenever a beat comes along, you're on a note of the chord, in this case the G major chord, a G, B, and D. Now what you can do is simply reverse the scale whenever you land on a note of the chord on the beat, which is, if you play the chord tone scale right, every beat. So the first exercise that I want you to do is to improvise using the G major chord tone scale and just reverse the scale at various places. So I do this in the following example. The next thing we need to do is review the G major chord arpeggio. So remember, the chord arpeggio for a major chord is 1, 3, 5. The first note of the scale, the third note of the scale, and the fifth note of the scale. So for a G major scale and G major chord, that's the note G, which is 1, B, like boy, which is 3, and D, like dog, which is 5. So you need to be able to play G, B, and D notes from as low as you can go in first position to as high as you can go in first position. So that would be this. So go ahead and review that G major chord tone scale, or that G major chord arpeggio, excuse me. Now in the G major chord arpeggio, of course every note you're playing is a note of the G chord. So anytime you're playing the G major arpeggio, you can play any kind of pattern you want. And there was one of those videos where we went through a whole bunch of different G major arpeggio patterns. You can go straight up, you can go straight down, and you can go from either direction to either direction, or from any pattern to any other pattern at any time, because you're always on a note of the chord. So here, and this is what I'll want you to do as well, here in this next little bit, I improvise using just notes of the G major chord arpeggio. And then after you watch this, I want you to stop the video and you do the same thing. So let's combine the last two things that we did, the major chord tone scale and the arpeggio. Remember, on the major chord tone scale, you're always playing a note of the chord on the beat, and of course in the chord arpeggio, you're always playing a note of the chord. So any time that you're playing either one of those and the beat happens, you can switch from one to another. Okay, let's look at this. And that'll always mean that the note of the chord is on the beat, which is what we're looking for. If I play the G major scale and I ascend from open G to the G note, the 5th fret of the D string, when I get to this G, I'm on the beat. So there I could switch to the G major chord, the G major arpeggio. And if I get to this B note, that's the beat as well, so I could switch to the chord tone scale right there. So if I put all that together, it would be, once again, the chord tone scale, arpeggio, scale. So that might be my improv right there. Which sounds just fine. You can hear how that fits the G chord. Okay? So in this example here, I'm going to improvise for a bit using both the major chord tone scale, the G major chord tone scale, and the G major arpeggio, and go back and forth between them. You'll see that here. pause the video and you do the same thing. Improvise using the G major chord tone scale and the G major arpeggio. Let's add another idea. Remember when we did the major chord tone scale, we had some phrases that went with that. One of them was what I call chord tone scale lick number 1. And of course, if I keep doing that pattern, then there's major chord tone scale lick number 2 that goes the opposite direction. It's the same musical thing, but it goes the opposite direction. So I want you to review those two things here. These phrases are both 4-note phrases, and the beginnings of each of the phrases is on the beat. So you can switch from one to another at any point. So once again, let's just say I start with chord tone scale lick number 1 on the G note on the E string, the 3rd fret. And then when I get to B, the 2nd fret on the A string, I switch to chord tone scale lick number 2. So that would be so here I improvise using just licks number 1 and number 2, and just improvise going back and forth between them a few different times. Now I want you to pause the video right here and you improvise doing the same thing. So now let's combine everything that we've done so far in this video. In review, we played the G major chord tone scale. Ascending and descending. We played the G major arpeggio, both ascending and descending, and then in any kind of pattern that you wanted to. Then we did chord tone scale lick number 1. And chord tone scale lick number 2. So, let me just take another example. Let's say that I start on open G with the G chord arpeggio. Once again, remember that on any beat, there's always a note of the chord on the beat. You can go from any of these to any of the others. So let's just say I play the G chord arpeggio, the G major chord arpeggio, from the open G to the B note, the 2nd fret on the A string. Here, maybe I decide to do chord tone scale lick number 2. On this open D string, maybe I decide to go down the chord tone scale go down the chord tone scale from D to B. And then come up the arpeggio. Okay? Let's see if I can remember all that. Nope. Let me do that again. There it is. Let me do that again. Okay. Once again, you can hear how that fits the G chord, the G major chord, just fine. Okay. All right. So here I'm going to do this, improvise against a G chord sound using those ideas. The G major chord tone scale, up and down, the G major chord arpeggio, up and down, and then chord tone scale licks number 1 and 2. Okay, now I want you to pause the video and do this. So this is a really great way to practice improvising, is take one of the ideas that we've learned so far in this. Remember all those things we did on the G scale. We did the G major scale up and down. We did the G chord tone scale. We did the G major scale in thirds. We did it in triads. We did it in a whole bunch of different things in triads. We played the chord arpeggio. We played the chord tone scale licks. So you've got a whole bunch of things now. If you've been practicing these things that I've given you, you now have a whole bunch of things that you can put together. So take a couple of them. First of all, take each one individually and practice it. You know, I would take that idea both going up the scale and going down the scale and practice it. Then take another one and then put those two together. Then maybe take another one, practice it, and then put the three together. Okay? So it's really only after doing all of them over a period of time that you start to get the idea of how they can fit together. Now, I very much suggest using a play-along program of some type or other, like Band in a Box, like iRoll Pro. You can look up Band in a Box and look up iRoll Pro. iRoll Pro is a great app that uses for iOS devices like iPhones, iPads, and for Android devices. It doesn't work for your computer, I don't think. Maybe it does. Maybe they do have a version that'll work on a computer now, but I'm not aware of that. The one that I use for my computer is Band in a Box. Okay, so it's more expensive, but it does more things, and it actually, the more expensive version of Band in a Box with the real tracks sounds really good. They use real players, and so it sounds like you're playing with real players. But make sure you start with the improvisations at a slower tempo so that you give yourself some time to think about some of the things you're doing, because it's real important that you learn how to think while you're moving along. That's a big part of improvising, is learning how to think in motion. Learning how to hear what's going on around you and how to think while you're improvising. Okay? So do that, and when you're comfortable doing this on a number of things on the major scale, then move along to the next video that covers the same kind of things on the dominant scale and chord. I'm Pete Martin. Thanks for watching.